Good morning. Welcome to episode 28 of the Hockey Variety Podcast. Hope you're having a good morning so far. It's Friday morning. I'm recording this before work because I have quite the busy weekend ahead of me, actually. I'm playing in a little fun tournament. And yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Should be good. Here's the thing, though. The games start at 7 a.m. Saturday or Sunday. Depends on what team you're on, obviously. So there's going to be 8 teams, I think. And the same 2 teams that play at 7 a.m. on Saturday won't play at 7 a.m. on Sunday. So pretty much depending on what team I am on, I have a 50% chance of having to play at 7 a.m. Now, that might not sound so bad for some people, but I have to drive an hour away. So pretty much I have a 50% chance of having to get up at 4 a.m. One of the 2 days on the weekend. And you might be thinking, why don't you just sit out that one game? Because anything for hockey, okay? Seriously, I paid for this tournament. I'm gonna play every single game without a doubt. And if I have to get up at 4, I have to get up at 4. That's fine. That's part of being an adult. So yeah, really looking forward to that. These little fun tournaments, it's like if you finish dead last, you still have fun. If you finish middle of the pack, you still have fun. If you finish first, you might have a little bit more fun. But either way, you have fun either way. So I'm very excited for that. It's cool. You get a jersey out of it too. Hopefully get to play on the same team as some of my guys on my regular beer league team. So that'd be really cool. And yeah, so this will probably end up being a pretty quick episode. There's actually one pretty neat thing about this episode. I'm going to be talking about all 32 teams at one point or another. Granted, some teams I'm only going to kind of, barely mention, but either way, I'm still talking about all 32 teams, which is pretty exciting. What else is going on? Nothing really new going on in life. Work has been quite busy. The other day I was on YouTube and I saw this little 10-15 minute documentary about Rush when they wrote the song YYZ. And that was pretty neat. I don't know. I recommend it. Look it up. They're talking about how I think the rhythm of the first bit of the song is like YYZ Airport, like Toronto Airport in Morse code or something like that. So yeah, really have to think outside the box to come up with that kind of music. They are such an incredible band. I know what they were doing yesterday on April 20th. Anyways, speaking of YYZ, I want to start with the Leafs in Tampa. So I'm going to talk about every playoff series. Every series has now gone to game 2. I worded that poorly. Sorry. Every series has played 2 games. And 6 of those 8 series, rather, are tied. 1 game apiece, including this one in front of me. So yeah, I'm going to talk about all the series, and then I'm going to talk a bit about the draft lottery, where everybody's odds are, and what exactly some teams are going to look like if they get Bedard at the draft lottery, or at the draft rather. But they're picking number 1. So, anyways, we'll start with the playoff series here. So I want to start with Leafs and Tampa because this is this has obviously been the talk of the town, but I have quite a bit to say about this, so let's get this one out of the way first. So Toronto lost game 1 pretty badly. I didn't catch much of the game, but apparently they did not look good at all. Tampa came out buzzing and they kicked their butt. But game 2 last night, it pretty much went the other way. Toronto won, I think, 7-2 over Tampa when it was all said and done, but they had a big lead most of the game. They were in control most of that game. The Stars showed up. They were getting points, and John Tavares got a hat trick, I believe. So, yeah, good response by Toronto. But let's not forget, Tampa is still in the driver's seat here, and the reason why is because they haven't played a game at home yet, right? Because if they say that you're not in trouble until you lose a game at home. And the reason why is because if teams don't lose at home, then the series is guaranteed to go to game 7. And being in a game 7 position is a much better position than being behind in a series, right? So Tampa's still in the driver's seat going into game 3 in Tampa. I think home ice advantage definitely, or I think playing at home definitely favors Tampa than it does more than Toronto, because Toronto media, Toronto fans, oh man, everyone was losing it after game 1. As if teams don't ever lose game 1 and then go on to win the series. Like, you gotta be crazy if you think Toronto's out of this just because they lost the first game. Now, granted, apparently they looked quite quite deflated during grade one during game 1 there. So I guess the overreaction is a little justified, but like, come on, it's one game, and then Toronto bounced back last night. Like, they did it. So I remember after game 1, I saw a poll on YouTube, Sportsnet. They were like, "How you feeling today, Toronto fans? How nervous are you?" And it's like, do you want your team to win? Do you want Toronto to win even? Because like, I swear the media is like, they don't want their own team to win for some reason. Like, this isn't making these kind of polls and making these kind of comments, like, it's not helping your team. It's just putting more pressure on them. You're tormenting your fans a little bit. And I get that's what, like, so many Leafs fans are thinking right now, but, like, Sportsnet doesn't need to get in on it, okay? Like, seriously. And also, like, the memes, it's been, like, 7 years of this. Who is finding the Leafs first round loss memes funny still? And I'm just saying, because, like, if you hear the same joke, like, a bazillion times, how are people still like, oh, it's so funny, It's like if you heard the same knock-knock joke, every day during April and May for the last 5 or 6 years. Like, it gets old. That's how I feel about these first-round loss memes. It's like, okay, we get it. Toronto can't get out of the first round. Like, So, just so much negativity when it comes to the Leafs. I really hope the Leafs get out of the first round just so people can just shut up. Like, that's it. That's not me being a Leafs fan. That's not me being a Leafs hater. That's just me being so tired of this conversation. I just want Toronto to get out of the first round. I don't care what they do after that. I just want the memes to stop. Okay, I'm getting tired of it. So, I don't want to make a prediction of who's going to win game 3. But I'll tell you what, I think game 3, no matter what, I think it's going to go to overtime. Both of these two teams a little too, a little bit too loosey-goosey in the first 2 games. I think they know that. Vasilevsky's going to bounce back. That's not even a question. While at the same time, I think Samsonov has, gotten some of his confidence back after that first game where he got the hook. So yeah, I think game 3 is going to go to overtime. I think Tampa's in the driver's seat right now, but that doesn't mean Toronto can't win one in Tampa, and then, they go back to Toronto tied 2-2. And I don't really know if home ice is an advantage for Toronto at all at this point, but, it was kind of cool seeing that arena buzzing last night when they had the lead pretty much the whole game there. I think, no, they had the lead the whole game, yeah. So Marner scored in the first minute, and then it was just Toronto from there on. So, fans getting a little wild in that game too. They're kind of chirping the Tampa players while they're in the penalty box. That's just like, shut up. Okay, you're drunk. Go home. Okay, or don't go home because you probably paid like $600 for those tickets. So maybe stay and just be on your best behavior. Okay, Boston and Florida. This is going about as expected. Closer than people may have anticipated. Florida looked really good in game 2. I'm really happy for them. Alex Lyon still looking pretty good, but Boston's gone through these first 2 games without Bergeron, and that's your number 1 center. Like, forget Bergeron for a second. A team not having their first line center for 2 games is a tough position to be in, of course, but Boston, they have that depth, and they probably didn't want to lose game 2, obviously. But I still like Boston, and I still think this is going to go the distance. I still think this is going to go 7. But like I said with Tampa, like, you're not in trouble until you lose a game at home. So it's tough. I don't want to say Florida's in the driver's seat right now because Boston, I still think, is the better team, obviously. Whereas with Toronto and Tampa, I think it's more close, right? So it'll be interesting to see how game 3 goes tonight. yeah, not really too much more to say about that at all. I was gonna have like the like the points leaders and stuff on these slides too, but I really don't have a lot of time, so I got to keep moving through this. But yeah, this series going about as expected. Game 3 is tonight in Florida. Okay, here's one where I think it's well, I don't know. I mean, the Islanders. Okay, Carolina's up 2-0 against the Islanders in the series, but the Islanders haven't played a game at home yet. So, like I said, you're not in trouble until you've lost a game at home. And yeah, the Islanders haven't lost a game at home yet. I know Carolina has looked really dominant so far, and my pick is probably going to end up being wrong. I do like the Carolina Hurricanes now that I've seen a little bit of how both teams have played. But I think this can totally change. I think that the Islanders could win 2 at home, and then suddenly we're tied. You're not in trouble until you lose a game at home. This series could end up going 7 still. Yeah, a bit of drama too. Taro Teravainen with the broken hand after a slash that I believe didn't get called. That sucks. Yeah, I can't really say too much more about that one. Brent Burns, 4 points in the 2 games as well. Very happy to see Burnsy, producing in the playoffs here. I would love to see that guy win a Stanley Cup. If Carolina ended up winning the Cup this year, I'd be pretty happy about that. There's quite a few players on that team I would like to see win their first Cup. And likewise with the Islanders too, with Horvat. It'd be cool seeing Horvat, win a Cup. And hey, don't rule out Sorokin. Sorokin can still take this team on a run. I believe he's looked pretty good in these first 2 games. 9-18. I got stats in front of me here, so I'm going to just kind of pull them out here and there. But, I don't think this one's done, but, Carolina being up 2-0 certainly doesn't hurt. However, out of the 8 series in the playoffs right now, I think this one is done. Okay, New Jersey and the Rangers. New York is up 2-0 in the series, and they haven't even played a game at home yet. So, yeah, and they've looked like the better team. Their offense has been buzzing. Shesterkin, he's got a 961 through 2 games. I know small sample size, but he's been great through 2 games. Fox has 6 points. Kreider has 4 points. Patrick Kane. I said Kane was going to show up in these playoffs, and he has not proved me wrong yet. 4 points in 2 games. Crazy town. Heel, 3 points in the 2 games too. So, yeah, this is the Rangers series. I think the question at this point is not if they're gonna win, it's if they're gonna sweep. Really, the Rangers look great. It's not even that the Devils have looked bad. It's just the Rangers, man. They're I might even be second guessing because right now in my bracket I had New York losing in the Stanley Cup Finals, and it looks like they could make it all the way, at least at this point. I know, small sample size, but they've looked good, and they look complete. They look like a complete team right now. And I'm starting to wonder, hey, maybe I should have picked them for the Cup. So yeah, the Devils, I think they're done, but hey, it's a young team. I don't think the expectations were too high for them going into these playoffs. But, yeah. Okay, Colorado and the Seattle Kraken. They're tied 1-1. Seattle playing spoiler in game 1, pulling off the win over Colorado. I think Eli Tolvanen had the early goal in that game 1 as well. But Colorado, they came back. They were down. I think they were down 2-0 at one point last night, and they came back and they won. So this series is tied. But hey, Seattle's going home with it tied 1-1. Now here's the thing though. Seattle, they were a really good road team this season. And they were a really good road team this season. And at home they were kind of meh. So, kind of like Toronto, is being at home really an advantage? I think so. I think it's going to be interesting seeing Climate Pledge Arena in the playoffs, fans buzzing. I think that's going to be pretty exciting. So, yeah, this has been a good series so far, though. I've caught bits and pieces of it. Grubauer's looked pretty good. It's good to see him come through in the playoffs, while Georgiev has looked kind of of shaky at points here. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see this series. But personally, I think in terms of like, the on ice product right now, I think this has been the best series so far. It's been exciting. If you haven't caught a game from this series yet, I highly recommend it. I've been trying my best to stay up to date or stay up with this one, but I've been going to bed so early, so but it's been a great series. Highly recommend checking out Game 3 tomorrow night, or maybe it's during the day. I don't know. Let's see here. Saturday, yeah, tomorrow night 7. If you can watch it, do it. Because yeah, it's been a good one. Get my screencasting software's acting up right now. So anyways, well, not really. It was doing some stuff. So Dallas and Minnesota. This has been an interesting one as well. Yeah, questionable decision going into game 2 2 nights ago. So Gustafsson played game 1. The game went to double overtime. Gustafsson looked great in net for Minnesota. I believe he put up 962 in that one game. He was fantastic. He had like over 50 shots against. I think it was like 51 saves on 53 shots or something. Gustafsson looked great. But in game 2, Dean Evason starts Marc-Andre Fleury, and he looked bad. And it was pretty much done early on. Not good. Not a good performance by Fleury, or the team as a whole. Ryan Hartman getting the overtime winner, and he was nursing an injury too. He got the overtime winner in game 1, and then he didn't play game 2. So it was a very different Minnesota team that second game, and Dallas looked great. I mean, Dallas did what they've been doing all season. But why don't you start Gustafsson? It's insane. Like, it's this boomer energy, man. You got to start the guy. You owe it to him. You owe it to Fleury. Like, no, start the guy that's playing good. Like, I can't think of a time a team had like a goalie with a 952 in game 1, and then they don't start him the next day, or 962, and then don't start him the next game. That I thought was pretty crazy, and honestly, I think Minnesota just straight up deserved that loss. That was a poor coaching decision. They're going to Gustafsson in game 3. They have to. Because you got Jake Ottinger at the other side of the ice, and this is going to be a goalie duel. We knew this going in. You shouldn't be messing with, you got to play the hot goalie. So, very poor coaching decision by Dean Evason, in my opinion. Okay. The Pacific Division, we've got Vegas, we've got Winnipeg. They're tied 1-1. Winnipeg surprising everybody in game 1 there, but Vegas, they brought it back for game 2. Laurent Brossoit having a bit of a bounce back night in game 2 last night. I kind of thought maybe they'd go with Quick, but they didn't. Yeah, I don't really have too much more to say about this. I haven't been following this series too closely. I don't really see any like big leaders. I mean, Adam Lowry has 3 points in 2 games there, so that's kind of cool. But Carlson, Stone. I mean, Stone's got 3 points in 2 games. Like, it's cool seeing him bounce back from his injury and not really looking like he missed a beat. Granted, I think a lot of that offensive production was in last night's game. And Winnipeg's in the driver's seat here. They're going back to Winnipeg tomorrow night. They're gonna be a whiteout probably, because that's what they do in the playoffs. Yeah, exciting time for Winnipeg. They are definitely in the driver's seat right now, and yeah, interesting series. Edmonton LA has also been an interesting series. They're tied at 1-1 after the 2 games in Edmonton. Edmonton, I think they just blew it in game 1. I watched most of that game. I watched pretty much all that game actually, including the overtime, and yeah, it's just, Edmonton, they had the lead. They were looking really good. And then, they just left like that little bit of opportunity for LA and they capitalized. I thought Korpisalo looked pretty good in that game 1 as well. He's got a 921 so far in the playoffs, so he's looking good. And Stuart Skinner, he's got an 898. So, we'll see. I know I'm talking a lot about goaltending here, where I should be spending a bit more time talking about some of the offensive producers here, because Leon Draisaitl 5 points in those 2 games. He's looking great. Kopitar's got 4 points. Kempe's got 3. I think McDavid only has the 1 assist so far. So it'll be interesting to see game 3 tonight. And we'll see if McDavid really kind of does what he does. I would expect a big game from McDavid tonight. He's ready. He's seen Leon put up all these points. He's like, hey, I want some of that. So, yeah. Oh, I totally didn't. Did I even mention Adam Fox in New York? He's got 6 points in 2 games. He's been on fire. So yeah, game 3. I don't know which way it's gonna go, but expect McDavid to be on the score sheet a little bit more. That's what I am predicting here. I don't expect a change in net or anything like that. I think it's still going to be Skinner, Corpusalo. That's kind of what I expect the whole series here. So, yeah, expect a better game from McDavid. And this has been an interesting series. I could see it going to 7 easily. Okay, now the last bit of today's podcast, I'm going to be talking about the teams that missed the playoffs and how they will look if they win the draft lottery. So the little poorly made infographic thing I have on the screen there, it's pretty much like, you can think of it kind of like that cycle of contention I made. By the way, check out that video if you have not. And I will be revisiting the cycle of contention after the playoffs, after the lottery, maybe even a little bit after some of the free agent signings have happened. So in July, I would expect that. But on the screen here, I have pretty much my little I don't know, diagram. If one of the teams in the Bedard race wins Bedard, what are they going to look like next season? Are they going to be still rebuilding? Are they going to be going for the playoffs? Are they going to be trying to push for a playoff spot if they get Bedard in the draft? And then I have like my question mark category because I don't really know. Okay, so one thing I want to clear up too is I'm going to talk about the teams that aren't mathematically able to get the first overall pick. Because there are, maybe I'll just get into that actually. So, there's 5 teams that aren't going to be able to get the first overall pick because you can only move up, I think, 10 spots in the draft lottery max. So, even though these 5 teams, Ottawa, Buffalo, Pittsburgh, Nashville, and Calgary, even though they could technically win the draft lottery, it means they're not going to actually get the first overall pick. They can move up to second or third or whatever. And their chances of winning that lottery are actually very slim because, as you know, the lower you are in the regular season standings, the better odds you have. And then these 5 teams, they were a lot closer to the playoffs than some of those other teams, especially Calgary and Nashville and Pittsburgh. So, though these guys don't have a chance at getting Bedard, they have a chance of moving up the draft lottery. So with these 5 teams, I just kind of want to talk about how will they look if they get one of those top draft picks that's not named Connor Bedard. So, maybe a Fantilli, maybe a Carlson. And I think it really depends on which guy it is too, So obviously all 5 of these teams are probably thinking playoffs next year, especially Buffalo, especially Ottawa. I think there's some more question marks right now with Pittsburgh and Nashville. And who knows about Calgary? I mean, on paper, they should be thinking playoffs because they have all these guys locked up. They have a good roster that just didn't come through this year. So if you inject a player like a Fantilli, I don't know if they can actually get up to number 2. I didn't look too much at this, but if they can get a young player that can go into the lineup right away, though it might be in their best interest to keep a player in wherever their AHL team is. I don't remember anymore. I almost said Bakersfield, but that's Edmonton. They're not in Stockton anymore. I don't know. But keeping a player in the AHL, that might be best. Or, that player can continue at NCAA or the CHL or whatever, right? Or play overseas in the case of Michkov. And it makes you wonder which team would be a good fit for Michkov because he's not going to come into the NHL right away. It's already confirmed he's going to play in the K for, I think, at least another year. It might be a few, though. So which of these teams is okay with pushing a guy down the road a little bit? That's a good question. So, yeah, if Ottawa or Buffalo or even Nashville, if you can inject a young top draft pick right into the lineup right away, I think they are right back in the hunt next year. Pittsburgh, I think there's some more questions there because they're getting old. Uh, Tristan Jarry is a UFA this summer. I kind of feel they'll want to go in a different direction with goaltending if they want to try to get back in the playoffs. But it might be time for Pittsburgh to really consider a retool or a rebuild. And then Calgary, who knows? I mean, if Calgary wins the draft lottery, they'll take it. And maybe that's what they need. I don't know. Though there's going to be people that say that, Sutter is going to ruin a young player or whatever. And who knows, right? So any of these teams would love to move up the draft rankings, obviously. By the way, I know Arizona has a conditional pick that is Ottawa's first rounder. But if Ottawa wins the draft lottery, they get a top 5 pick in the draft. That stays in Ottawa, and then it gets bumped to next year. Or maybe 2025. I think it's next year, though. Okay, let's talk about everyone else. And I should get the regular season standings open, because I do want to go in order when talking about these teams. There we go. Okay, so I do want to go in order of their odds for getting the first overall pick. So I'm going to start with Vancouver. And I do want to kind of justify why I have these teams where they are. Because this diagram actually looks a bit more different than... it looks quite a bit different than I expected. I kind of thought I'd have more teams in the still rebuilding section and the question mark section. But I'll get to every team and I'll kind of explain why I have teams where they are. But, teams like Montreal and Arizona, I can understand putting them in the question mark category instead, but I'll get to that. So, Vancouver. Obviously, if Vancouver gets Connor Bedard, and yeah, this section in the podcast, I'm just talking about Bedard. I'm not really talking about those other top prospects. So, I'm not going to talk about if, one of these teams gets a Fantilli. I'm just talking about Bedard right now, okay? So, with Bedard, you're pretty much injecting a first-line center right into your lineup right away. And how good he ends up being, it depends, right? Is he going to be comparable with, a Logan Couture right now? Is he going to be comparable with, a Crosby right now? I'm not talking about, a Crosby-type career, though I think he will have that kind of career. But is he going to be like Crosby was in his first year? Is he going to be are you going to get the same production as you would out of a modern day Logan Couture or a modern day, I don't know, put whatever first line center, a John Tavares type production, or are we going to see a superstar right away, So, yeah, it really depends. But I think either way, he's going to be, I'm going to say a point a game player this first season. That might be a stretch, but you're injecting a point a game player first line center right into your lineup right away. And if Vancouver got that, I'll start with Vancouver because they have very poor odds for Bedard, but they technically are in the race. And if they get Bedard, they're going to be going for the playoffs. It's not even a question. They've got the roster. Bedard is exactly what they need, but they need to make the moves that will, support a player like that. So if Vancouver gets Bedard, they're right back in the playoff hunt. Same with St. Louis. This is exactly what St. Louis needs. Their odds are very poor for getting Bedard, but if they did, and you make the right moves in the offseason, then, St. Louis, if they have a hot start to the season, I think they're right back in the contender conversation again. But I think the big question mark with St. Louis is goaltending. They should not have given up on Husso. They should have made Husso work somehow. Because he's been great in Detroit, which is the next team. Yeah, if Detroit gets Bedard, but Detroit was already thinking playoffs this year. It just didn't work out. Especially after the trade deadline when they sold, which was a good decision. But if they get a Bedard, they are going for playoffs 100%. Steve Yzerman will not accept anything less, I think. They're going to be playoffs. They've got the young core. Detroit would be terrifying if they got Bedard. They maybe not next season, but in a few years, Detroit with Bedard, holy cow, that is you're seeing what New Jersey's doing right now. I think Detroit would do that and more. So, yeah. Washington, I put them in going for playoffs if they got Bedard. Because when you think of that top line center role with Backstrom getting older, Kuznetsov apparently wanting out, they could definitely use a Connor Bedard. But, are they going to be able to bring in the pieces around him to support that team? With Ovechkin, Bedard and Ovechkin on the same line would be nuts. And on the power play, too, that'd be terrifying. So, yeah, if the Capitals got Bedard, and, I think that's exactly what they need too. I mean, any of these teams would love a Bedard, but, some of these teams with the aging core, a Bedard would really speed up a retool. So, yeah. Okay, next up, I've got Philly. So Philly's the first team I'm going to talk about in the question mark section. Because if Philly got Bedard, I don't know if they're ready to be going for the playoffs right away. I think they might still be, maybe instead of going for a rebuild, they go for a retool at that point, and then kind of push us down the road a couple years. Let Bedard develop on the top line with Tortorella coaching him. We'll see how that would go. But yeah, Philly obviously would love a Bedard, but I don't know if they'd be going right for the playoffs right away. But we'll see if they make the right moves in the offseason. If some of their guys get healthy and ready to go for the next season, Philly, they could be going for the playoffs, but I got them in the question mark category right now. Now, okay, here's the first maybe surprise here is Arizona. I think if Arizona gets Bedard, and I'm going to put a bit of a condition here too. If Logan Cooley signs his ELC and plays for Arizona next year, I think there's a chance that Arizona goes to the playoffs this year. I think it would be more likely they push for the playoffs rather than doing the rebuild thing again. They got tons of draft picks the next few years here too. So they're still kind of setting themselves up for the future. But keep in mind, a lot of those picks are other teams' picks. So it's depending on how they finish, not so much how Arizona finishes. Granted, Arizona has all their first two, I believe. So, yeah, I think if Arizona got Bedard, they would be looking to try to get into the playoff conversation. I think they have the pieces. I know a lot of people don't because they're a small market and might not know too much about them. And they have the flexibility to make moves in the offseason to maybe improve that roster a little bit. I really like their coach too, Tourney. I think he's done a really good job. So yeah, if Arizona wins the draft lottery, I think they're going for playoffs next year, personally. Same with Montreal, and pretty much for the same reasons. Young roster, the young players are improving. Hopefully Slafkovsky can stay healthy next season and continue his development. But Suzuki looks great. Caulfield looks great. You have those guys that just came out of nowhere, like Arbor Zakai and that Harvey Pinard kid. Goaltending might be a bit of a question still, but that might be something they can address in the offseason if they get Bedard. So, and they want to make that team better. So I think if Montreal gets Bedard, they are going for playoffs next year. Rebuild is over. Go for it. Think maybe like Buffalo was this season, okay? They might just fall on the outside, but this is a team that I think they'll be right outside the playoffs, if not in the playoffs next season. Okay, back to the question mark category. I have San Jose. My favorite team, the San Jose Sharks. I have no idea what they'll do if they win the draft lottery. I have a feeling, I mean, if it was Doug Wilson, GM still, they'd be going for playoffs 100%. But I'm still not sure what Greer would do. I think Greer is leaning more towards rebuild right now, but if they get Bedard, I would be jumping for joy. But I don't know if it's in their best interest to be going for playoffs right away. And it's tough because they kind of have the roster that could do it. Outside of goaltending, I think they would also need an upgrade in net if they want to go for playoffs next season. But you have guys like Carlson, you have guys like Couture who are not bad. Then there's guys that you're kind of banking on developing a bit more, like Bordelot, like Eklund. And then there's guys where it's like you really need to see some improvement, like Vlasic. So, yeah, and then there's guys that need to stay healthy, like Knizov and Ferraro. So, yeah, I don't know what San Jose would do if they got Bedard. I don't know what they would do next season. I would kind of want them to take it slow. Don't make those moves yet to go for it, but it's tough. I kind of have a feeling they would go for it. if they had a Connor Bedard. So I don't really know where to place the Sharks. Now, the only team I have still rebuilding if they got Bedard is Chicago. And that is only because of the lack of prospects. That is because of the lack of like talent. They just have so many meh players, and very few of those are young players. So it's, if they got Bedard, he'll get first line minutes, but I think they're still going to be going for the rebuild. I think they're going to take their time. Even if they get Bedard, they're still going to be looking to finish dead last in the league and try to get better draft odds for the following draft. And, I don't know. That might be kind of good for Bedard because there'll be less pressure. I don't think people will be like taking him for the Calder if he ended up on Chicago. But if Chicago gets Bedard, and don't get me wrong, I think Bedard's gonna be a front runner for the Calder regardless of what team he goes to. But yeah, I think if Chicago got Bedard, they're still gonna take their time. They're not gonna jump the gun here. Okay. Columbus. Let's not forget that Columbus is not really a bad team on paper either, okay? They had a bad season because of injuries and because of guys like Elvis performing poorly this season. Guys having down seasons and injuries. This isn't because of a lack of talent, in my opinion. These are all, Columbus has a good roster, okay? Again, just guys that have been injured and guys that have had down seasons. I think that's what got them this season. So with that in mind, if you inject a Connor Bedard into Columbus, playing with some of his, with Kent Johnson, a guy he knows from the World Juniors, I think Columbus is going for playoffs again if they get a Connor Bedard. But they need to stay healthy, and they're going to need either a bounce back from Elvis, or they're going to have to rethink their goalie situation as a whole. And it kills me to say that because I love Elvis Merzlikins, but this might end up looking like an Edmonton situation where you sign Campbell and then he's not looking good. And I know they've had Elvis for a while, so it's not the same situation, but he's locked in for at least a few more years, I believe. So Columbus, if they get Bedard, I think they're going for playoffs the next season. But like a lot of teams I've talked about so far, they're going to have to make some moves in the offseason to support Bedard and those young players that they have on Columbus. Columbus has some very good young players that could have breakout seasons this season, especially if they're playing with a guy like Connor Bedard. So I've got Columbus for playoffs if they win the draft lottery, but they'll need to make some moves to make this work. The last team I'm going to talk about is Anaheim. This is a team that you might expect to have in the still rebuilding category. And I'll be honest, if it's between going for playoffs or still rebuilding for Anaheim if they win the draft lottery, I'm leaning a little bit more towards still rebuilding because this was a really bad team this year. Really bad defensively. You're bringing in Bedard. You're bringing in another player that's known mostly for his offense, but there's definitely some think like how McDavid stepped up his game defensively this season as well. I think we could eventually see something like that with Bedard, but right now he's the offense guy. So bringing in Bedard, I don't know if it answers your defensive issues, unless you're planning on outscoring your opponent like 7-6 every night. But here's the thing with Anaheim, and here's why I have them in question mark rather than still rebuilding. They have a ton of cap space this summer. Okay, if they get a Connor Bedard, and then they lock in guys like Zegras and Terry, and then, because a lot of that cap room is going to probably go to those guys. If you make the right moves in the offseason, I think this could be a team that goes for playoffs with Bedard and with the right moves in the offseason. But they could go either way. I mean, if Anaheim wins the draft lottery, and they have the best odds right now, 25% of getting the first overall pick. So statistically, they're more unlikely to get it than for them to get it, but they have the best odds out of any individual team. It'll be a very interesting offseason if Anaheim also has Bedard on their roster. It's going to be very interesting because they could keep rebuilding for another year. I don't think 2 more years. I think maybe they would do 1 more, if anything. Or do they go for playoffs? Because I definitely think that's a possibility because they have the tools. It's just, can you sign the right free agents or can you make the right trades work? Um, it's gonna be an interesting offseason for Anaheim no matter what. But if they don't get Bedard, I know I wasn't gonna talk about the other guys, but if they get a guy like Fantilli or Leo Carlsson, they're probably gonna do the rebuild thing for at least another season. But if it's Bedard, then they have some questions in the offseason. Are they going to keep rebuilding or are they going to go for it? I think they could do either, but leaning a little bit more towards the still rebuilding section. So, yeah, I think I talked about every team there, which is good. Whew, 40 minutes, not bad. But hey, if you disagree with any of this, let me know. There's definitely a few teams in there. I could see them maybe in the question mark section, maybe in the still rebuilding section. Maybe there is a stronger argument that a San Jose Sharks team with Bedard should go for playoffs next year. So if you have anything to add about any of these picks, just leave me a comment in the comment section. I'd love to hear from you. But yeah, I think there's definitely a good argument to have some of these teams in different places. And that's it for episode 28 of the Hockey Variety Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the episode today. If you have not subscribed on YouTube, you should. That's what all the cool kids are doing. We're trying to get to 10 subscribers before the end of 2023. We've been sitting at 7 for a while, so and one of them is the burner account, so it's kind of 6, but So so yeah, if you enjoyed the podcast, definitely leave a like. Subscribe if you're not. You can follow me on Facebook at Hockey Variety Podcast. Very active on Instagram still. Hockey Variety Podcast on Instagram, all one word. Leave me a follow. Can stay up to date with all my boomer takes in the Instagram stories there. So yeah, definitely leave a follow there. I don't know when the next episode is going to be. It won't be this weekend because I got a lot of hockey to play. Hopefully this little fun tournament goes well. And yeah, hope you enjoyed.